The first alert appeared on the Coalition's deep-range scanning lattice as a faint distortion, a ripple in metrics that usually remained stable across entire star systems. At first, technicians assumed it was a calibration issue, but the anomaly sharpened into a single object moving with precise, unbroken intent. When the identification algorithms finished processing, the war room fell into a stillness that bordered on disbelief. A human vessel had entered Coalition territory without warning. Only one. It wasn't a stealth craft. It wasn't a scout. The whole silhouette indicated no classification known to any military database. It traveled without escorts, without a visible support fleet, without any sign of typical Terran deployment patterns. The Coalition's command staff found themselves staring at telemetry that contradicted every doctrine they had studied. Humans never ventured alone. Their fleets, whenever mobilized, moved like coordinated storms, tightly stacked formations, layered firepower, overwhelming readiness. Yet here was one solitary ship, drifting with calculated ease, as if it had no concern for the dozens of monitoring stations already tracking it. Whispers spread through the war room as analysts magnified its image. The vessel's frame looked reinforced beyond normal combat standards, with armor plating that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Embedded structural lines suggested internal systems larger than anything a ship of that size should contain. Engine signatures pulsed irregularly, almost alive, like a controlled star flickering behind containment fields. Every alien officer present reached for their datapads at once, attempting to match what they were seeing to any known Terran design, but nothing came close. Strategists began drafting theories immediately. Some suggested the humans were testing the Coalition's response. Others argued it was a provocation, an attempt to lure the Coalition into firing first. A few claimed it was a diplomatic gesture wrapped in human arrogance. Regardless of interpretation, one fear cut through every assumption: humans never acted randomly. The ship slowed as it reached a junction of major trade routes, positioning itself in a location no tactical officer would choose unless they wanted to be seen. It remained at a complete stop, broadcasting nothing, ignoring all attempts at communication. Coalition intercept fleets moved to high alert, and reserve battle groups were summoned to staging posts. The council members observing the operation demanded a full breakdown from their intelligence corps, pushing for any historical precedent where humans had sent a lone craft. Only one account surfaced, and even that was classified so heavily the summary read like a cautionary myth. A single Terran ship had once appeared in a remote Empire's space, issued a warning, and left. The Empire dismissed it. Within 72 hours, their enemies, released by their own actions, eradicated them. Humans had intervened only to alert them of what their weapons testing had awakened. That historical footnote created a quiet unease now creeping through the Coalition's ranks. The present intruder offered no such warning. Its silence carried weight, as though the ship was measuring the galaxy around it instead of waiting for orders. Even the most skeptical officers found themselves drawn to the possibility that the humans knew something the Coalition did not. A commander finally voiced what many feared to consider: the Terrans were not a species inclined to symbolic gestures. If they had sent one vessel, it meant one vessel was sufficient. The war room's lighting dimmed automatically as tactical overlays filled the air. The human ship's systems remained unreadable. Its energy fields did not match any known reactor type, its thermal profile contradicted its structural mass, its onboard activity registered fluctuations that suggested weapon systems far beyond conventional spectra. Every attempt to penetrate the distortion field surrounding it produced erratic data, as if the ship rejected analysis entirely. The Coalition gathered its nearest armada, but even as they mobilized, a sense of imbalance settled in. The ship did nothing threatening. Its engines idled at low output, weapons offline, shields dormant. Yet not a single officer believed it was vulnerable. Something in its posture, its unmoving confidence, communicated quiet dominance. Speculation spread like wildfire. Perhaps humans were displaying restraint. Perhaps they were delivering a message through presence alone. Perhaps something had driven them to act with uncommon precision. The Coalition leaders found themselves forced into a position they rarely occupied, reacting rather than directing the flow of events. The lone Terran vessel remained at the center of their screens, silent, still, and undeniably intentional. Something had changed the moment it arrived, though none of them yet understood why. The galaxy was watching one human ship, and wondering what justification could possibly warrant coming alone. Recon drones moved first, darting across the void with silent thrusters, their sensor arrays calibrated to dissect every centimeter of the Terran vessel. Within seconds, half the drones lost feed. Systems went dark, telemetry froze, and their processors recorded nothing but static before collapsing into unreadable streams of fragmented data. The remaining drones tried switching to alternative wavelengths, but even those signals warped as if space itself distorted around the human ship. By the time the last drone closed in, all its readings were inconsistent, mass fluctuating, energy output oscillating beyond charted limits, and shields that did not behave like any known defensive technology. Coalition analysts attempted to reconstruct the data, but the results produced more questions than answers. The ship carried power levels fluctuating between dormant silence and star-core intensity. Its armor density surpassed theoretical materials. Even its electromagnetic emissions formed patterns hinting at semi-conscious modulation. The more they studied it, the less sense it made. And through all these anomalies, the human vessel remained perfectly still, offering neither acknowledgement nor hostility. Tactical officers proposed combining long-range scanners with predictive algorithms to estimate its capabilities. The projections were unsettling. If even half of the readings were accurate, the human craft could dismantle a fleet several times the size of the Coalition's nearest battle group. Yet no one could confirm whether the distortion effect was intentional or a passive byproduct of its systems. That uncertainty alone intensified the unease rippling through every command station monitoring it. Communications specialists cycled through every protocol: diplomatic, military, emergency, ancient archival channels, even linguistic constructs purchased from independent data traders. Not a single hail received a response. The silence became more unnerving than any weapon display. Species who had fought humans before recognized the pattern. Terrans only withheld responses when evaluating a situation too critical for casual diplomacy. Meanwhile, the Coalition Council received classified briefings outlining past Terran conflicts. The records emphasized a consistent theme: when humans deployed minimal force, it was never a sign of weakness. They preferred precision, containment, surgical resolution. Many remembered the Terran intervention in the Vraxian Rift War, where a small human detachment stopped a catastrophic chain reaction before a dozen civilizations could react. That story revived old warnings whispered through military academies: do not misinterpret human restraint as vulnerability. As the Council debated motives behind the lone vessel's presence, the ship abruptly altered its orientation. No acceleration. No thrust signatures. Space bent around it, gently repositioning the craft as if it had rewritten localized physics. The motion was small, but deliberate, gradual rotation aligning its bow toward the Coalition's gathering fleet. The gesture lacked aggression, yet it carried unmistakable consequence. It was watching them now. Fleet commanders ordered all battle groups to form defensive positions. Engines roared, hulls shifted into formation, and weapon systems primed. The human ship's energy field flickered once, an almost imperceptible shift, and every targeting sensor dropped lock. Technicians scrambled to recalibrate, but the interference adapted as quickly as they compensated. It wasn't jamming, it was something more refined, as though the ship recognized the scans and neutralized them individually. Fear spread through the Coalition ranks in quiet, unspoken waves. If the Terrans had developed technology capable of responding to targeting systems automatically, they had reached a strategic advantage beyond existing doctrine. Even the most confident commanders felt the tension tightening around their decisions. Yet retreat was not an option. A foreign power had penetrated Coalition borders, and political pride demanded an interception. The Armada assembled, 127 vessels forming a crescent line, carriers at the rear, cruisers flanking, destroyers screening the forward arc. The sheer scale of their force dwarfed the solitary human ship, yet no one felt reassured. Every ship's crew sensed the imbalance pressing against their instincts. The Coalition fleet represented power through numbers. The Terran craft represented power through something else entirely. As the distance closed, the human vessel emitted a faint pulse. Not a communication. Not a threat. A scan. One sweep through the entire battle group, reading every system and shield frequency with surgical efficiency. Coalition officers froze as readouts flared across their screens, confirming the pulse had penetrated deeper than should have been possible. The humans had assessed their full capabilities in an instant. The silence that followed was heavier than any declaration of war. Every alien officer felt the same realization settling into their thoughts. The human ship wasn't preparing for them. It was calculating something larger. And whatever purpose had brought it into Coalition territory, it had not come here uncertain. It had come with intent, one ship, fully aware that an entire armada was still not enough to change the outcome of whatever would unfold next. The Coalition armada stabilized into formation around the human vessel, weapons calibrated at full readiness, though every commander understood the imbalance beneath their confidence. Despite their numbers, the Terran ship displayed no concern, no defensive posture, no sign that it even recognized the pressure of an encirclement. It simply hovered at the center of the crescent-shaped fleet, rotating slowly with the same unnerving precision that had accompanied every movement since its arrival. A final transmission was sent in all major languages, demanding the human vessel power down and submit to inspection. For long moments, nothing changed. Then a faint vibration rippled through the comm channels, clean, direct, unmistakably deliberate. 4 words emerged, spoken with a calmness that carried more weight than any threat. "You should back away." The simplicity of the message struck harder than a barrage. Officers glanced at one another, uncertain whether to classify the statement as a warning or a declaration. Analysts searched for hidden meaning, code, layered implications. There were none. The humans had spoken plainly, and the fleet had no idea how to respond to such direct confidence. The Council interpreted the transmission as a refusal to comply. Orders were issued to disable the human ship's propulsion and isolate it for containment. Destroyers moved to optimal firing angles. Turrets powered up with synchronized pulses. Dozens of targeting reticles locked onto the Terran hull. The moment the command was given, a spread of ion-binding rounds and disruption beams launched across the void, streaking toward the lone vessel with practiced precision. None of the weapons reached their target. Mid-flight, the projectiles and beams folded out of existence. They didn't explode, didn't deflect, didn't fade. They simply vanished. Sensors attempted to track the anomaly but recorded only a void pocket where physical interaction ceased to behave normally. Space returned to normal a heartbeat later, empty and undisturbed, as though the attack had never occurred. Bridge crews stared at the empty space where their weapons should have struck. Technicians scrambled to recheck coordinates, but logs confirmed perfect firing paths. Something had intervened with effortless superiority. Before anyone could process the failure, the human ship released a single pulse. Not a beam, not a missile, just a broad wave of compressed spatial distortion. It spread through the armada like a silent tide. Ships shuddered, lights flickered, and systems dropped into forced hibernation. Engines powered down simultaneously across all classes. Shields collapsed without alarms. Guidance systems froze mid-calculation. In the span of 3 seconds, 127 fully armed warships became inert hulks drifting helplessly in formation. No explosions. No casualties. No hull breaches. Just complete paralysis executed with surgical restraint. Captain shouted for engineers to reroute power, but every attempt to restart systems failed. The human pulse had bypassed mechanical architecture entirely, striking at the internal coherence of the ship's energy signatures. The same problem echoed across every bridge. Nothing was damaged, yet nothing worked. The Terran vessel finally transmitted again, its voice steady, almost patient. "We did not come here to fight. But you activated something you should not have." Confusion surged through the fleet. Command channels lit up with frantic requests for clarification. The humans offered none. Instead, they projected an encrypted data packet directly into Coalition command frequencies. Its contents triggered immediate alarm. Energy readings matched a classified artifact buried deep within Coalition space, a structure countless experts had dismissed as inert. The obelisk. Most officers had only heard rumors. Few knew the full extent of its origin. Even fewer knew the Coalition had recently conducted deep scans on it. Those scans now aligned perfectly with the anomaly that had drawn the Terran ship into their territory. The human vessel adjusted its course, angling toward the region where the obelisk lay dormant. The movement was steady and unhurried, as if confident no one could impede its path. With their systems disabled, the Armada could only watch as the solitary warship glided past them, leaving a wake of powerless giants drifting in silent frustration. Recovery teams worked frantically to restore control, but the implications hit harder than any technical failure. The humans' earlier words now carried a darker weight. They had not responded to territorial boundaries, diplomatic hostility, or military force. Their presence centered entirely on something far more important, and the Coalition realized too late that they were not the threat the humans had come to confront. The Terran ship continued toward the obelisk, unchallenged, unstoppable, and now clearly acting with purpose far beyond the Coalition's understanding. The fleet could only drift in its shadow, powerless spectators to whatever would unfold next. The obelisk's coordinates transmitted by the human ship spread through the Coalition's command network faster than any countermeasure could contain the shock. What most officers believed to be an ancient monument or abandoned relic now appeared on their displays with a new, terrifying energy signature, unstable, rising, and unmistakably active. Coalition leadership demanded immediate explanations from the research teams stationed near the artifact, but responses came fragmented and panicked. Their scientists had initiated a deep layer probe days earlier, breaching internal segments they assumed were inert. That assumption had now become a catastrophic mistake. While the Council argued over accountability, the human vessel advanced through space with silent authority. It didn't accelerate aggressively or cloak itself in defensive power. It simply moved with the certainty of something fulfilling an obligation it had anticipated long before anyone else realized the danger. Coalition warships struggled to reboot their systems as the Terran craft crossed their immobilized formations, its hull absorbing scattered light like a void drifting through their ranks. The human transmission accompanying the data packet continued to unravel the Coalition's confidence. The obelisk, according to Terran records, wasn't a monument but a seal, one of several built by civilizations predating current galactic history. The humans had inherited responsibility for its maintenance during a conflict so old that most of the galaxy considered it myth. The Terrans had encountered the sealed threat during their early expansion eras and realized the implications of its awakening. While other species explored for territory or resources, humans mapped old scars left by forgotten predators. That forgotten enemy, the transmission warned, fed on dimensional fractures. Disruptions triggered by scans or energy intrusions acted as beacons. The Coalition's research probe had pierced layers designed to remain untouched, releasing patterns that drifted through adjacent realities. What had once been dormant could now sense movement beyond the barrier. The energy spike radiating from the obelisk proved the breach wasn't theoretical. Something on the other side had noticed. As the Council absorbed the information, evidence of the breach became unmistakable. Space around the obelisk twisted subtly, as though refusing to stay in one shape. Coalition satellites in the region began reporting hallucination-like distortions, where their sensors saw structures that weren't there and heard signals without emitters. The closer they approached, the more physics bent, forcing observers to withdraw before their instruments melted under cognitive overload. Military advisors demanded time to regroup the disabled fleets, but analysis teams warned that the breach's expansion was accelerating. The human ship was the only asset capable of reaching the site before irreversible destabilization. Even the most prideful Coalition commanders understood the implications. If the Terrans were correct, and their precision suggested they were, the artifact's awakening could erase star systems before their fleets reactivated. The human vessel arrived near the obelisk without hesitation. Coalition observers watched from long-range arrays, their feeds trembling from spatial interference. The Terran ship deployed energy lattice fields that no Coalition engineer could decipher, patterns forming around the hull in fractal symmetry. The obelisk responded immediately. Its once dormant surface lit with swirling glyphs that no species had been able to translate, each symbol pulsing in sync with the ship's output as if acknowledging an old agreement. Coalition leaders finally understood the scale of their misjudgment. Humans had not treated the obelisk as a mystery because they already knew what it contained. They hadn't intervened in its study because they had hoped ignorance would keep other civilizations safe. Their arrival wasn't an act of territorial defense but a mandatory reaction, the kind of reaction a species performs when ancient obligations ignite without warning. Commanders across the Council felt the weight of a realization that stripped away their assumptions about Terran intentions. Humans weren't expanding empires or seeking strategic dominance. They were standing guard over something the galaxy was never supposed to meet. Their silence, their restraint, their calculated responses, all of it aligned with a single purpose: prevent a catastrophe no other species had the knowledge or will to confront. The obelisk's surface ruptured with a spiraling crack that poured impossible light through the void. Coalition observers recoiled as the distortion widened. Whatever waited behind the breach had sensed its freedom. The humans had warned them too late. And the lone Terran vessel prepared to face what the rest of the galaxy had accidentally awakened. The rupture widened into a spiraling maw that dragged surrounding matter toward its core, bending starlight as if reality itself were being peeled back. Coalition sensors strained to interpret the phenomenon, but every reading contradicted itself. Gravity spiked in impossible directions. Electromagnetic fields twisted into shapes no model could predict. And from inside the breach, something vast pressed against the thinning fabric, its presence felt before its form became visible. It was not a creature in the conventional sense. It was an intrusion, an intelligence shaped by a dimension where structure had no permanence, and movement did not require physical form. The human vessel positioned itself directly between the breach and the surrounding star systems. While Coalition fleets remained powerless, engineers helplessly watching systems flicker without responding, the Terran ship activated its internal core. Energy readings exploded across every monitoring display. The ship's hull separated along hidden seams, expanding into a lattice of luminous frameworks, each segment locking into geometric harmony. The Coalition had underestimated its scale. The vessel's true shape had been restrained beneath its armored exterior, a containment platform designed for singular, catastrophic events. The breach reacted to the ship's activation with violent fluctuations. Tendrils of distorted space whipped outward, slicing through the void. Satellite arrays collapsed instantly under the strain. Even from vast distances, Coalition observers felt a tremor run through their ship hulls as if the creature's attention briefly brushed against them. The Terran captain's transmission cut through the chaos, calm despite the cosmic force rising before them. "Do not approach the boundary. Maintain distance. This encounter is ours alone." The intrusion surged forward, manifesting a surface that flickered between transparency and impossible density. Colors that had no names writhed across its shifting mass. Coalition commanders watched helplessly as it lunged at the human ship, reality warping around its strike. The Terran vessel met the impact not with shields but with an anchored field that absorbed the distortion and redirected it into stabilizing counterwaves. Each clash hammered the void with shock pulses strong enough to deform spacetime. Observers watched stars flicker unnaturally as the confrontation unfolded. The Terran ship engaged its core fully. A luminous spear, an event horizon lance pulled from compressed singularity mechanics, formed at the vessel's heart. Coalition scientists recognized none of its physics, but its purpose was unmistakable: sever the breach, collapse the intrusion, and fuse the dimensional tear before irreversible expansion. The ship released the strike with overwhelming precision. The lance tore through the creature's form, collapsing segments of its mass into implosions of fractured color. The breach convulsed, its edges snapping inward, resisting closure as though clinging to newfound access to this reality. The intrusive being retaliated with a final surge, enveloping the Terran lattice in a crushing wave that caused light itself to fragment around the ship. Coalition leaders held their breath as structural integrity readings plummeted. Yet the vessel endured, reinforcing its lattice with a cascade of energy patterns that stabilized its failing segments. Terran systems did not falter. They adapted under pressure no other civilization had ever survived. With its remaining strength, the ship discharged a secondary collapse sequence, an inward-folding detonation that targeted the breach's foundation rather than the entity within it. The reaction was instantaneous. The rupture cinched shut, sealing faster than the creature could escape. Dimensional pressure snapped back into equilibrium, erasing the distortions in a single violent contraction. Silence replaced the cosmic roar, and the obelisk dimmed until it resembled nothing more than a scarred monolith floating in cold space. The Terran vessel drifted after the collapse, its hull scorched and its lattice retracting with visible strain. Systems flickered but remained operational. Coalition warships finally regained control, propulsion returning in staggered bursts. As they oriented themselves, a final transmission from the human captain reached every active channel. Your research woke what was never meant to be touched. We contained it. Remember this, when humans send only one ship, it is because we already understand the danger, and because more would serve no purpose. The ship stabilized its remaining systems, prepared its jump sequence, and vanished into a clean fold of space. No threat, no demand, no claim. Only a silent departure that left the Coalition staring at the aftermath of a disaster they had never been prepared to face. The lesson was clear: humanity's greatest power was not its weapons but the burdens it carried alone. And the galaxy understood, with sobering clarity, that a single Terran ship was never a sign of weakness, only a warning of what was at stake.